some of the roles that existed 5 years ago are not going to exist in 5 years. And so I think being ahead of that and anticipating what that looks like is one of my primary responsibilities.
Do you want to put a stake in the ground on which roles?
How many emojis do you use in Slack?
Right.
We laugh, but like it matters.
It's a real thing.
Yep.
So welcome to One Size Fits None. I'm your host, Brian Distelberger. We're here with a very, very special guest today, Liz Walton Egan. Hello, Liz. How are you today?
Hi, so happy to be here.
Wonderful. Great to have you. So Liz has had an incredible career. I got to know her very early in her career where she was at Yext, held a bunch of different marketing roles. Most recently at Yext, she was the CMO, and then she went on to join Lattice and was the CMO at Lattice for a while, and now is running marketing for a company called Chainguard. Liz, first, what does Chainguard do?
Yeah, Chainguard is infrastructure that's secure by design. So we basically take open source, rebuild it from source every single day, removing vulnerabilities, making it a minimal image, and then we provide that image to companies so they can have a secure foundation for building software.
Awesome. And I hear the company's doing quite well.
Extremely well, having the best time. It is so fun. Reminds me of the early Yext days.
Excellent. Oh, good. Very cool. So speaking of the early Yext days, can you briefly walk us through just what the size of orgs you were running at both Yext and Lattice, and a little bit about what that looked like, and then we'll get into Chainguard.
Yeah, well, I want to say, you said you've known me since, the early days of my career. I vividly remember being 24 and walking into your office in one of the early Yext offices, and in some ways you gave me my big break, so thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, Brian hired me. Yeah, so I was at Yext from 10 million to 400 million through the IPO. Over the course of 10 years, I had varied different team structures and sizes. I think at its height, I probably had a 60-person team that was including sales dev. For marketing globally, we were really focused on pipeline generation and sort of that cross-functional group that is going to help make that successful. So that's sort of the path that I had at Yext. Lattice, the marketing team was also global. Sales dev was part of it. So it was another 60-person org. Core marketing was probably about closer to 30. And Chainguard's similar. Chainguard's growing really fast. Right now, my team's about 20, but by end of year, we're going to be 30. So
you're hiring. Yeah.
I'm hiring.
Any specific roles you want to call out real quick?
Product marketing, probably the most.
Go to the website. All right. Awesome. Cool. Now we're going to do a quick lightning round. And I just want to, for the audience, just get into how you're currently running your team. A lot of our focus here is around, things are changing so quickly. And so how are you doing it? All right. So you mentioned how big your orgs are. How do you have the team structured? How many directs do you have? Yeah. What does that look like?
Well, I got a verbal today, so I'm going to have 4 directs.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Building out the team. 4 directs. At Yext, I think at its peak, I probably had 8 directs. I like having a lot of directs. I think it allows me to be in the details and allows us to move more quickly by having fewer levels of management. And that's kind of my guiding principle in many ways. Right now it's 4. We'll see how that changes over time. I think span of control is really important to keep under control, meaning everybody should have minimum 4 up to 8 or even 10 direct reports. So what I think one of the worst things you can do is give someone just 1 direct report. So I really try to avoid that sort of level of layer of management. It slows things down, and it's actually as for that person, it's really hard to manage and be player coach. So span of control is a metric I pay a lot of attention to.
Right. No, makes a lot of sense. Totally agree. How do you deal with soliciting feedback from your team, about your team? How do you address all that?
Yeah, well, I would say that there's formal and informal ways. Formal is, the performance reviews coming from Lattice. You can imagine we were pretty rigorous around how we thought about that. I think the 360 feedback is really important. In some ways, I look at that more than I look at the self-evaluation. That's not just other people who are working, other peers, but I actually think that the direct reports of your report give the most insight. So I think that that's really important. Though people sometimes can be kind of either shy in written reviews, or they can be they feel like it's their time. So I like to do spot checks. I like to have more sort of qualitative conversations regularly to get feedback. And that can be little things like, how's it going with collaboration? How's this project going? That kind of thing. And I do that pretty regularly. But I also like to have feedback myself. And so in just about every one-on-one, I ask, how can I help you more? What can I be doing better? And I think creating that culture establishing that from the start allows you to have that kind of dialogue and that feedback culture.
Right. So you mentioned one-on-ones. How do you approach one-on-ones?
I know these can be controversial, but I think they're non-negotiable. I do them every week with my directs, 30 minutes. It is their time. I allow them to come up with the agenda, but I generally come with a couple things I want to talk about. I like the startup pace. I don't work in weekly cycles. I work in more like 36-hour, 24-hour cycles. So it's not like we're waiting to have, we're not holding a bunch of topics for that. I'm really big on async communication. So it's more like it's a chance to build the relationship. It's a chance to ask questions that maybe are not as pertinent to the project that you're working on. I think it's a super important relationship building moment, and you can go deeper on certain things. It's a chance to give feedback, positive and negative. Chainguard's 100% remote, which means that you don't have the hallway conversations. And so those one-on-one moments, I think, are actually even more important.
Do you modify how often you do it based on someone's tenure, level of experience, anything like that, or everyone every week?
When someone's starting, I do it more frequently. It could be 3 times a week. There's certain people who actually just, I find they need to call more often. And so sometimes I'll just do that. It won't be a scheduled thing. There's someone on my team I have a twice a week one-on-one with, just because of the state of our projects and the way that our collaboration looks. So I definitely change it. I also, one of the things I learned at Lattice, because we were so studied on this, is I do think that what people need varies pretty dramatically by seniority. So, a VP needs something pretty different than the entry level person. And I think if you don't recognize that, that's where you're going to come up short. So I think the more junior you are, the more important one-on-ones are. But I also, again, with like the remote culture, it's really easy to skip on the relationship building side of things, but that's ultimately what keeps people in seat for a long time.
Right. Totally agree. How would you sort of characterize the difference between what someone more junior needs and someone who's like VP or higher level?
A junior person is going to need a lot of direction. I would probably have the one-on-one be a little bit more about the projects and the programs and a status check-in, and I would suggest leaving some room for the relationship building stuff. The manager's going to need to direct that one-on-one more. With a more senior person, if I'm having a one with the VP, I expect them to drive it.
No, makes total sense. And then, so how do you, sort of a whole bucket around goal management, making sure people are working on the right stuff, getting done what they need to. How do you approach that whole piece?
I'm conflicted on this. Yes, my hot take. Yeah. Goal management's really hard. It's important to set goals. And I would say it starts at the company level. What are the main objectives? Obviously, it's going to be things like revenue, but I do think sort of that next level down of you can't do everything. And so what are the 3-4 things that are the most important? And I think we did this really effectively at Yext, actually. Like there were certain product moments that products we were trying to push through. That was the metric we looked at daily. And that was a rallying cry for the team. So I think setting those, but you want to make sure you set the goals high enough that they're a stretch versus ones that you can achieve. And so sort of creating that dynamic is important, but also not being too punitive if the goal was too high, but you did still pretty well. And then I believe in the goals kind of cascading down and the plans cascading down from there. When I think about goals, I think they need to be quantitative. I know that might seem obvious, but like a binary, did it happen, did it not happen, is not a goal, in my opinion. I think it's important to check in on the progress of, if there are metrics that you care about enough to set a goal, you need to check in on that progress weekly. Otherwise, it's not worth setting a goal on.
Right. No, it makes sense. So in that whole area of like, how do you make sure people are tracking against their goals or hitting it? Do you do stand-ups, check-ins, if people send weekly summaries? How do you approach that whole thing? All of the above.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say, the reason that I am conflicted about goals is you can do so much work to set goals, and then it takes away from the doing of the work. So that's my hot take, but I focus on the doing of the work. So I have my team, my directs send me weekly updates on what's going on. We have a monthly project check-in with the whole department, where it's not about getting a gold star. Like I make that very clear. It's about saying what's changed, what are the blockers, what's at risk, and let's talk about how to solve it together, basically, so there aren't any surprises. And then weekly, we send out reporting on pipeline, but also sort of the campaigns and the performance of that. I refresh it probably hourly, so I know exactly what's going on, but we do a deep dive weekly. And that's with the whole department. Like they see not just the performance, but also the action items. Down to the most junior person, like, in this high growth environment, you're there to do your job, you're there to make the company successful, but you're really there to learn. Like that's the reason I stayed at Yext for 10 years, and because I love you so much, of course. But
Feels mutual.
Yeah, but I was learning. And I think that if you don't expose people to that, then you're actually taking part of the experience from them. So that's where goals, I think, create that dialogue in education. Oh, and then stand-ups. I do daily stand-ups when there are programs that require it. So for example, recruiting, as you can tell, we're hiring a lot. I was doing a daily stand-up for like a month on that, and now we don't need the daily stand-up anymore.
Would it be fair to characterize the daily stand-ups as sort of something that's like urgent or extremely high priority, or you basically think is not going well?
All of the above.
Is that the bucket of roughly when you, so when that is the case, you basically do a daily stand-up? Other than that, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Let's get into like people side of things. And so, it's always been my experience that there's sort of like a bucket of top performers, there's kind of a bucket of bottom performers, and then, a lot of people that are somewhere in between the two. And then leaders will often spend a lot of time on the top performers and the bottom performers. And it just ends up being this like sort of weird thing. How do you actually like manage the team, and specifically like what do you do around like top performers? And then we'll get into how you deal with poor performers.
This is something where I have a lot of thoughts too. Even the concept of a top performer and a bottom performer is tough, because it's like, what were the expectations? Were they really clearly communicated? Is the person well suited for that role, or was it a mishire? And so when someone's not, I'll start with the bottom performers. When someone's not performing well, I generally look at that. Like, what mistake did we make? Is the person just simply like, is it skill or will? Is the will not there? Then that's on them. But if the skill is there, or the will is there and the skill is not, then maybe something needs to be adjusted and we can make this person successful. So that's how I approach bottom performers. I also think these problems become bigger if you don't address it right away. So generally, if I have a thought about someone, I like to express that thought.
How do you do that?
Yeah. So if it's someone on my team, I share feedback. If I didn't like how something went, or I thought I try to frame it as positive. Like, here's how I think we should do this in the future, versus like, you didn't do a good job.
Of course.
With more junior people, I think then it's more of like, is it a daily coaching thing? Is it like, how do we get this person on the right track? But addressing it sooner will end up saving you time. And both, that means changing the behavior, but also if it's not a fit, it's better for everybody if you address it.
So if there's someone who's not a fit, how do you like to approach that? Do you do like performance improvement plans and that whole thing? Do you like to just like be direct and deal with it quickly?
It depends on the level. It depends on the role. If it's like a customer support person or something, you probably need a PIP. There's legal reasons you'd want a PIP. If it's something where it's like a VP, I don't think a PIP is going to be as effective. I also think if you showed up one day with HR and a PIP in a meeting, that's actually, I think, kind of unfair to that person. If that's the first time they're hearing about this, like, you should be giving feedback continually. And then I think it's more of a conversation of like, what's not working? Again, skill, will, like, do you want to do this? Are you happy? Is this something that's aligned for you with your goals? And if it's not, then I think just having that respectful, open dialogue goes a long way. So do I believe in PIPs? I think yes, for certain circumstances and certain roles, but the more senior, no.
Right. Makes sense. All right. Top performers.
Top performers are my favorite ones.
Why can't everyone just be a top performer?
So I think a lot of that is will. I think a lot of that is, what is their motivation? What's their work ethic? And sometimes that doesn't mean working more, just like, how do they approach the problems that need to be solved and the work that needs to be done. I look at speed. I think that's something that's really important, like velocity, momentum, and career. I would rather hire someone who does not have the experience, but is super hungry and motivated. They're just always going to perform better. They get a lot of time because I end up giving them more work, right? Like, more great work begets great work, something like that. So that's why I end up spending a lot of time with them, because that's where you build trust and you want to work with them more. But from the sort of management side of things, they generally take the least time. And it's the people in the middle who kind of do their job. And again, I think it depends on the level here, but who do their job. Those are the ones to watch. And so I like doing a talent review where you calibrate on I at Lattice and at Chainguard, we use a 9-box. The reason I like that the most is you do it, like I do it with my directs, my whole leadership team, and then we can calibrate on what good looks like. So you may perceive this person to be an all-star, but the rest of the team doesn't. And I think it's important to have that dialogue about like, well, what's not working here.
Can you just explain for everyone what a 9-box is?
It's 9 boxes, and you have it based off of performance and potential. So you say, okay, this person is both high performing and high potential. They're in a certain box, and maybe there's someone who's really high performing, but the potential isn't, like they're sort of maxed out. That's okay, but it's just important to know what that is. And so you map everybody out based off of that. And then you ultimately, it should tie into performance reviews, how you rate them. It's funny, actually, at Lattice, it doesn't. People will put them in a sort of less high performing box, but they're afraid to have that conversation. So they'll give someone like a meets expectation performance review. It says more about human nature of managers, where behind closed doors, they'll be critical and it's harder.
Yeah, I was just going to ask like how you do the bucketing, because that was, whenever we went through this process at like Yext, it was just shocking what like the bell curve looked like of the people that are meet and exceed expectations would be like 85% of an org that is not achieving their goals. Made no sense.
And that's exactly it. And that's where like, if let's say you would receive that plotting and you could review it and you'd be like, what is going on here? I love it because then you can go and talk to that manager, that, whoever the department leader is, and say, nope, we're not aligned. And so that to me is the power of the 9-box, both the conversation in the room, but then also how it can cascade up. And then, if you're the president, you can also be like, oh, these are the top performers. I need to know their names. And it's a chance for you to identify top talent. It's a powerful tool.
What do you use as the input to figure out, like you sit with your leadership team and you're kind of bucketing everyone into their various boxes? Is it, people's intuition? Is there some data you use? How do you approach it?
It's pretty vibes based.
Yep.
I think it depends on the role. Like it probably, if it's sales, if it's BDRs, you would look at attainment. Marketing, for better or worse, it's harder to measure. Yeah. Some roles are easier, but some are very hard. And so then this is advice for managers, not for ICs. But, if you're an IC, it is about sort of the internal marketing you do. What's your reputation? What are you known for? Because that is where this stuff gets discussed.
Can you just touch on that for a second? Because that is such like a big thing that's like nobody really talks about, but is one of the more important things for people throughout their careers. But you just like elaborate a little bit more about what that means?
I think of two things. I'm a marketer, so I guess I have to use those terms, but like marketing your work, talking about the work that you do. That doesn't mean bragging. It's not like, oh, look how great I did, but just simply like, this happened. We're working, this is a program. I need collaboration or whatever it is. And I mean, this is a small thing, but even I did this at starting at Yext, but all the companies I work for, I have an announced marketing Slack channel because I just want the company to know what is happening. Because otherwise you might not see it. And marketing is a feeling, right? As much as it is quantitative. And so you have to demonstrate that. But I don't post very much in there, the team posts, because I want each person who is doing the program to be communicating it. But that's just my style. Relationships is the second piece, I'd say. Harder in a remote environment. But actually, I don't know if I've ever told you this, Brian, but I would go to all our leadership offsites. We did them quarterly for a while. And I would go in with a list of like the 3 people I wanted to get to know better. That was my strategy.
Wow. You're pneumatic for telling me this.
Where I'd say, I have these great relationships. These people are newer, or maybe I just don't feel like I'm not as tight with them. And I would be intentional about spending time with them.
That's so interesting. It's also, I think, so smart.
It's easy to miss the opportunity if you aren't intentional.
Right. I'd be really curious what that list actually looked like offsite by offsite.
It changed.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
It worked really well, though.
I mean, it's such an important thing that I think the way you phrase it is perfect. You just have to be intentional about these things, both from building those relationships to operate, but also that's how you build relationships from people you're going to learn from.
And it was like, I never went into it in like a manipulative way. It was more of, okay, this person, I don't know, John Buss and I didn't get as much time together. He was in Europe, and then we'd be in the same place. Let's have a drink. Simple as that.
Right. You're running marketing in the US. The company's starting to expand across Europe. You have a new person running the sales side of things across Europe. Like, makes all the sense in the world. And like, you have to make sure to do that. Incredibly important. No, what you were sort of hitting on, like that whole topic is frankly, we're here to talk about you, but it's one of the reasons Max, Mark, and I started Windmill. It was frankly the thing that drove me nuts is that we'd have like new managers, new executives like come into the company. They would have no context on the different people. And so the people that were, really loud, I won't even say good, I mean loud in their self-promotion would, the perception very quickly would be that they're, top performer and great. And then you'd have people that just, were sort of lunch pail, come in every day, get their job done, and were extraordinary, but they didn't really, they didn't figure that piece out well, or didn't want to do it, or, for a variety of reasons, and then they would totally get missed. And so how do you surface the true performance of what's going on across an organization? Is difficult.
Totally agree. Make it a little more black and white as quantitative. The other thing I'll say is again, in a remote setting, well, I guess in an in-person setting, the extrovert maybe had more of a chance to shine. In a Slack world or a Roam world, whatever tool you use, what rises to the top is actually different. And so I think leveling the playing field by making it more quantitative is everyone's advantage, because who knows what's next.
I would also argue another important dimension there is the way the company communicates. And so if you join and are part of a company that's like a Slack heavy company, if that's not the best way you communicate, it's going to be really difficult. If it's an in-person company and you're more comfortable with that, great. All the dimension of, and it's what's often sort of considered the company's culture, but specifically the culture and how they communicate is a really important thing, and something frankly people should be thoughtful about when they're joining companies, because it'll impact their career.
How many emojis do you use in Slack?
Right.
We laugh, but like it matters.
It's a real thing.
Yep.
How do you deal with roadblocks across your team? Like you're very engaged with your team and you have frequent one-on-ones. And so I imagine a lot would come through there, but do you have any other techniques to make sure your folks aren't getting stuck? Or
they are going to get stuck. I think my job is to get them unstuck. My job is not actually to push the projects forward. That's their job. My job is to see around corners and be like, okay, you're going to run into a wall here, or we're not seeing, people can get frustrated or they get overwhelmed, and I can help mitigate that. So what do I like to do? I actually like to join project meetings. I don't run them, and observe and just see, okay, where are we spending our time? What are the things that are popping up? Am I hearing about frustrations with collaboration? A lot of the marketing problems end up being ones of collaboration or resourcing, basically the two. And I can help on both counts. So roadblocks are going to happen. And it depends on the level of seniority. I expect my VPs to be able to solve them, but I can help anticipate and I can help think through and see things that maybe they can't see because they're too in it.
Makes total sense. Let's start looking to the future. So as you think about, so much is changing so quickly. I think first, just in terms of kind of 1 year time horizon, like what do you see that's actively changing with how you manage and run your team? And what do you think the rest of the year is going to look like?
My answer might be a little bit specific to the type of company I'm working for. I feel like over the past couple of years, with what we could call the market correction or the end of ZERP, the role of the manager has been tough, where it's been a lot of realigning expectations and resetting goals and dealing with morale and perhaps restructuring your org. At Chainguard, it's more of a clean slate and we're growing as fast as we can. And so my job, that's specific to me and my company, but I actually think that it feels like we're getting to be through the sort of tough sledding time, and a lot of the cleanup has happened. And so now I think it's more about like motivating and executing than it is about sort of rethinking.
What about for a little bit longer time period, over the next kind of 3 to 5 years? What's it going to look like to manage and lead a marketing org?
I think you're going to see roles and responsibilities change. I think like with AI and simply with even just how the tools that we're going to be using and how consumer, or I guess prospects buy, I'll use that term. Some of the roles that existed 5 years ago are not going to exist in 5 years. And so I think being ahead of that and anticipating what that looks like is one of my primary responsibilities.
Do you want to put a stake in the ground on which roles?
I think content's changing. What is required of content. Marketing ops is not changing, but the way the work gets done is changing, and like the systems that we use. And so, like our funnel, I think is going to look a lot different. And then related to that is demand gen will continue to evolve. Probably those are the most, but it's just, I think it's also like the number of people you need doing so. Like we needed a whole content army 10 years ago. We kind of don't anymore. I think sort of ecosystem marketing, we're going to see more of pulling in partners and influencers and all that kind of, and customers. Yeah, that's probably what I'd say. I feel like technology is what's going to change the most.
Oh, totally agree. Any closing words of wisdom for current marketing leaders, whether they're managing large team or small team, coming from someone who's run marketing at a public company, at one of the leaders in HR tech, and now one of the fastest growing startups out there?
This sounds sort of silly, but I heard someone say that we shouldn't call it the chief marketing officer. We should call it the chief market officer.
Okay.
I think to be successful in marketing, you have to be a business leader and you have to deeply understand the market and the customer. Because no matter what technology, no matter what trends, whatever it is, like that's the guiding through line through it all. If you have your company hat on and your business hat on, I think you'll be successful. And your superpower is understanding the customer. I think a marketing leader is as close to a general manager as you can get, and so approach your job in that way, and you'll be successful.
Interesting. I haven't heard that before. Like that, chief market officer. All right. Amazing. Well, Liz, Walton, Egan, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure. Best of luck with Chainguard. And for anyone that's listening, watching, Liz is hiring.
Come join me.